Namaste, hello, and a very warm welcome to UPSC for everyone. My name is Abhinav, and in this video, we are going to discuss selected topics from the Hindu and Indian Express. Now, in this video, we'll be discussing the following topics: shots fired at the LAC in 45 years. We'll see what are the new developments. Then we'll look at two reports that have been released by the NSO based on the 75th round of survey that the NSO conducted between June 2017 to July 2018. And then we'll look at one estimation by Goldman Sachs that our GDP will be shrinking by 14.8%. And finally, we'll look at Himalayas, the problems that people in the Himalayan region are facing. And why? Because September 9 is being observed as Himalayan Day by the Uttarakhand government since 2014. So we'll also look at the problems that the people of the Himalayan region are facing. So let's get started. So the first topic is LAC, shots fired in 45 years. So for the first time in 45 years, shots were fired. India said that China fired the shots, but China is saying that India fired the shots. We'll obviously believe our own government. So last time there was firing 45 years ago when an Assam rifle patrol was ambushed by the Chinese in Tulung La in Arunachal Pradesh. Now why are Chinese so rattled? Because on the night of August 29th and 30th, Indian Army occupied some heights in the Chushul sector. I've already told you that Chushul sector is important because see, here is Chushul. It lies south of the Pangong Lake. So Indian assessments say that if Chinese incursion was to occur, it will occur through this sector only. And even in 1962 war, the Chinese made incursions through Chushul only. So what Indian Army did, that it occupied these hilltops: Thangkung, Helmet Top, Black Top, Magar Hill, Pankha, ITBP Hill, then Rezangla and Rechingla, and a very important Mukpari Hill. So all of these are lying along the LAC. Now I have made a video about the whole LSA issue. So why these hills are important? Because the terrain of the region is very rugged and the natural terrain favors the Chinese side. So by occupying these hilltops, India has ensured that it has the advantage vis-a-vis China. Now China has been rattled. So since August 29-30, they have been trying every night to reclaim these hilltops. So PLA has been making almost daily attempts, and there have been multiple attempts at multiple places. Latest important attempt was at Mukpari Heights. See, this is the Sangpur Lake and this is Mukpari Height, just along the LAC, and it overlooks the Moldo post of the Chinese. So this is very important. And the Gurung Hill and Rezangla, these are just along the LAC. The strategic importance being that it is located west of the Sangpur So and northwest of the Rezangla. See, west of the Sangpur So and northeast of the Rezangla. And it provides significant tactical domination and it gives a commanding view of the terrain. So we had a natural disadvantage and we have converted that disadvantage into a advantage. And we can also overlook the Chinese position at the Moldo garrison. Similarly, the Black Top, which is also a very strategic height, has also been under Indian control. So from these heights, we can easily track the movements or any attempt at incursions by the PLA, because we can never trust the Chinese. So I'll provide a link in the description about the whole issue. I've made a video. I've given detailed explanation as to why China is doing so, what are the advantages, what are the disadvantages that we have, and who has the upper hand. I've also compared the military strength of the two countries. So please watch that video as well. Now there are many firsts in the ongoing standoff. Gunshots fired first since 1975 at the LAC in Arunachal. Last time I told you the last firing was at Assam Rifles Company in Arunachal Pradesh, right? And in the Ladakh sector, last time firing took place in 1962. Now, there was also killing of soldiers at Galwan. We lost 20 brave men, and Chinese were not even decent enough to acknowledge the soldiers that they have lost. So it speaks volumes about the kind of country they are. And then there was the death of SFF soldier, and that was publicly acknowledged by government. Even a senior functionary of the ruling party attended that funeral, and at the funeral there were chants of Jai Hind and Jai Tibet. So India is sending a message to China that they are not sensitive about our concerns, so we will no longer be concerned about what they deem sensitive. So things are getting heated up right now. Let's see if talks work, but we really can't trust the Chinese because they have a multi-pronged approach. They will engage us in talks, but their army will act differently. So let's see what happens. Now this article is about how disparity in access to internet and access to computers is hampering online education during this pandemic period. So basically this is based on the report of NSO, right? It conducted a household social consumption survey which was related to education, and it is a part of NSO's 75th round conducted from July 2017 to June 2018. Now first of all, what is NSO? NSO is the apex level government statistical organization, right? So it is engaged in the work of conducting surveys, collating their surveys, and giving statistics in form of various reports. Now earlier there were two organizations, NSSO and CSO. These two were merged together into a single entity called NSO in 2019. And this NSO comes under the Ministry of Statistics and Program Implementation. So this is about NSO, and NSO conducts various surveys, and based on those surveys we have various reports. So if you have to quote any figures, this is one of the authentic sources to quote figures. You'll find many reports in the newspaper, and most of the reports are useless because they're conducted by some private organization, and those are always motivated. So if you want to quote any report or survey in your examination, there are some limited sources that you should rely on, like NSO, official reports by Government of India, or reports by big organizations like IMF, World Bank, ADB, etc. Right? These days even UN is losing its credibility. So you should take the reports of UN with a bucket of salt, especially reports linked to human rights issues and terror issues. You should always take them with a bucket of salt. We'll get into UN. We'll make a separate video about how UN has been compromised. Now let us look at the findings of the survey. Number one, it says across India, only 1 in 10 households has access to computer, whether a desktop, laptop or a tablet. So that means barely 10%. So you should also donate your old electronics. For example, if you have old laptops or tablets that you do not use anymore, try to donate that to underprivileged students. Then it says almost a quarter of all homes have internet facilities, access via fixed or mobile network. So just 1 by 4 households have access to internet facilities. And most of the internet enabled homes are located in cities. So there's a urban rural divide. That means most of the homes having internet connections and access to internet are in cities. And in rural areas, this figure drops to only 15%. And there is also regional disparity. For example, the national capital has the highest internet access with 55% of homes having internet facilities. Other two states that have more than 50% penetration in terms of households having internet connection are Himachal and Kerala. And then there is the other end of spectrum, Odisha, in which only 10% of households have access to internet. There are 10 other states with less than 20% internet penetration, including the software hubs such as Karnataka and Tamil Nadu. You can look at these figures. You can take a screenshot and then you can analyze them later. Now, biggest divide is by economic status. There is no surprise. So the rich have access to internet and the poor don't. And it is basically dependent on their per capita expenditure. Now, even if there are households that are having access to internet, they don't necessarily know how to use it properly, because then there are issues of digital literacy. So in India, there is a huge issue of digital literacy. This means having internet access is no guarantee that one can use it. The NSO report shows that only 20% of Indians above the age of 5 years had basic digital literacy, and doubling to just 40% in the age group of 15 to 29 years. Now, digital literacy doesn't mean that you can't access social media or YouTube or any other site. Digital literacy means that you know how to use the internet to get what kind of information you're looking for. Now, what is government doing to handle this situation? Now, this survey is based on the data collected during 2017 and 18. So things must have changed, but pandemic has aggravated the problem. So the center has directed the state education departments to map online classes that are available for students. To solve any problem, first you need to know what is the problem. So this is the first step, that they have asked the state education departments that you tell us how many people or how many children actually have access to internet or online classes, so that we can plan the curriculum accordingly, as well as the teaching methods that can reach the students. And though we are talking about internet, the government is also exploring other mediums to reach the students, like use of television and radio. So the pandemic has hit education sector really hard, and let's hope it is not a zero academic year. Though the concerns of safety are there, but then exams have to be conducted. We'll also discuss the issue of exams some other time. Now, basically, I'll just give you a brief that what the Minister of HRD said, Mr. Pokhriyal. Now, there are many points why exams should not be conducted. We all are aware. But what the government stand is, he said that if exams are not held, I'm not justifying anyone, I'm just telling what his stand is. You are intelligent enough to form your own opinion. So he said that if exams are skipped, that means we'll lose an academic year. Now, for an example, a graduate that passes out, there can be disparity. Let us say average earning is 20,000 per month. So on that scale, the economy stands to lose 4,000 crore rupees per month only if we don't conduct the final year examinations. And secondly, what happens that many of the students, they want to apply abroad, and the universities abroad, they take gap years very seriously. Even though they know that this is pandemic and classes are not being conducted, then they will ask other questions that what were you doing? How did you utilize your time, etc., etc. So this is a very complex issue. There cannot be any simple answer. So we have to manage between the risk of disease and carrying out our lives. Let us hope a vaccine is soon available. 40% children not fully vaccinated, NSO report. This again is based on the 75th round, right? And this report is called Health in India. Now in this article, we'll also look at the immunization process in India. Okay. So this report said that almost all children in India are vaccinated against tuberculosis and receive birth dose of polio vaccine, but 2 out of 5 children do not complete their immunization program. So we have an immunization program which was initially called UIP and now it is called Mission Indradhanush. There was Mission Indradhanush 1 and then we are in Mission Indradhanush 2.0 and we have planned 3.0 and 4.0 as well in future. Now most of these children, they remain unprotected against measles and partially protected against a range of other diseases because they skipped their immunization. Now it says across the country only 59.2% of children under 5 are fully immunized. So almost 41% of children do not complete their full immunization. And this contradicts Center's Health Management Information System portal, which claims that coverage for 2017-18 stood at 86.7%. Now, first of all, let us understand what is full immunization. Full immunization means that a child receives a cocktail of 8 vaccine doses. I will tell you in a moment what are those 8 vaccines, okay, in the first year of life. Now, first, let us look at the immunization program in India. First of all, put simply, immunization is that they inject some form of active or inactive agents in your body that produces immunity against certain diseases. So the immunization program in India was started in 1978 as Expanded Program of Immunization or EPI under the Ministry of Health and Family Welfare. Then in 1985, it was modified and upgraded as UIP or the Universal Immunization Program. Now the UIP is aimed at preventing mortality and morbidity in children and pregnant women. So please pay attention, in children and pregnant women against 12 vaccine preventable diseases. So how many diseases? 12, and these diseases can be prevented by the use of vaccines. So vaccines are very important. For example, polio. It has a crippling effect on people, but a simple vaccine can help fight against polio. Now initially the pickup was very good in this program, but slowly because of bureaucracy and sense of complacency, it slowed down, and it had a very slow growth rate of 1% per year between 2009 and 13. So this was sort of a red mark because population was growing at much higher rate, but immunization is growing slower. So to boost this, government revamped the UIP as Mission Indradhanush. Now this has been implemented since 2015 and it wants to rapidly increase full immunization coverage to 90% of the population. And it targets children under 2 years of age and pregnant women. As I already told you, the immunization program is for children and pregnant women for preventing the mortality and morbidity of 12 diseases, right? So under Mission Indradhanush, we provide vaccination against 12 vaccine preventable diseases. Now, if you're preparing for any competitive exam, you must know the names of these. Especially UPSC these days, you really can't predict what they ask. So it is good that you know. Diphtheria, whooping cough, tetanus, polio, tuberculosis, hepatitis B, meningitis and pneumonia, Haemophilus influenza type B, Japanese encephalitis. It is only in selected districts, the districts that are most affected. Rotavirus, pneumococcal conjugate vaccine and measles, rubella. Now again, to further boost this program, government revamped it and upgraded it to Indradhanush 2.0. This is intensified Mission Indradhanush and it was launched by Government of India in 2017. And in 2020, there was supposed to be Indradhanush 3.0. Now because of corona, I think that has been put in the back burner, but as soon as we get back to normal, that program would also be started. In fact, there have been reports that because of this pandemic, the immunization program in India has suffered a lot. Now, the aim of Indradhanush 2.0 is to reach each and every child under 2 years of age. So, we saw in Mission Indradhanush 1.0, we had to cover 90% of population, right, for children under 2 years of age. Under Mission Indradhanush 2.0, each and every, that means universal coverage, we are targeting for children under 2 years of age. Now, it has a special focus on districts in which immunization coverage is 70% or below. Now, what are the 8 vaccines that are provided under Mission Indradhanush or the Universal Immunization Program? They are BCG for TB, DPT, diphtheria, pertussis and tetanus toxoid, OPV, oral polio vaccine, measles, hepatitis B, tetanus toxoid and Japanese encephalitis vaccination and Hib containing pentavalent vaccine, DPT, hepatitis B and Hib. So this is a brief introduction to the Mission Indradhanush state of immunization in India, and I've also told you that because of COVID, the immunization process has also been adversely affected. Now this article, Mountains That Sustain Millions, is about the Himalayas. I told you in the beginning that since 2014, the Uttarakhand government observes September 9 as the Himalaya Divas. Okay. Now, first of all, this word Himalaya comes from 2 Sanskrit words. Him means snow and Alay means abode. So that means an abode of snow. Now, Himalayas contain some of the youngest chain of mountains. Basically, Himalayas are called as young fold mountains, and they are geologically very active. That is why there are frequent earthquakes in the northwest region. And this region is among the 36 world biodiversity hotspots. Now, biodiversity hotspots are special areas that have some special conditions. For example, species that are endemic to that region, both floral and faunal. So, Himalayas are home to some unique species as well. And another important point is, as you move from Himalayas, from the foothills to top, you see all the variations in vegetation type as you would observe while traveling from the equator towards the poles. Now let us look at the unique problems of this region. Now, according to various estimates, this Hindu Kush Himalaya region is home to around 240 million people. Now this region has very particular problems. Number 1 is low food availability and decreased self-sufficiency. Now what is happening? That the youth, especially young men, are going out of the hills to earn livelihoods. So there's an out migration of youth, especially male out migration. And there is also increasing wildlife attack on crop. Now since the male members are going out, the responsibility of households is falling on the shoulders of women and the elderly. Now they have a tendency to do the laborious work and focus on livestock production. So they often neglect the crop agriculture. So this renders the land unproductive, and it also makes it more prone to wildlife foraging. Second is decrease in agrobiodiversity. Now agrobiodiversity means that every region is growing crops that are suited to that region. The dietary preferences of the people in the region are changing because of their exposure to the outside world. Many youth are coming to cities and then they're going back home and they are changing their dietary patterns. And because of the demand of different crops, the agrobiodiversity is also suffering. And this has led to an increase in nutritional insecurity. See, nature is the perfect engineer. It produces food which is best suited for particular agroclimatic region, and the people that live there, they can get all the nutrients from that locally grown food. But what people are doing, for example, in Punjab, that region is more suited for the cultivation of wheat, but people are growing rice. That is depleting the land, that is reducing the agrobiodiversity, and that is also hampering the health of the people in the region. So this is undermining the long-term agriculture sustainability in the region. Now there is also water woo. Number 2, water woo in the hills. For example, if you look at famous hill stations like Shimla, Mussoorie, Manali, they all have water problems. The residents of those regions would understand this. Now what is happening? There is lack of irrigation sources, and there is drying up of local small river tributaries or rivulets, aquifers, springs, etc. And like I told you in the previous video, that monsoon pattern is also changing. So the rainfall pattern has also become more erratic, and that is also hampering the water supply. Another reason is that the popular hill stations, they have started receiving tourist influx in large numbers, and the water supply is not designed to cater to such a huge number of people. So that is also depleting water. Now what can be done? So this article suggests that there should be mountain specific policies to strengthen the livelihood opportunities on both farm and non-farm activities. So this will help in controlling the out-migration of youth. Then organic methods should be promoted in farming. Organic food and organic products are very popular, and they also get good price in the market. Then local food systems also need to be revived, because if you grow a crop which is suited to the local regional conditions, then that crop is good for the environment and it is good for the health as well. And there is also need to promote niche products of the mountain. For example, apples from Himachal are very famous. Then there are other products that are famous from other hill areas. So those products need to be developed and they need to be marketed aggressively. So that's the next point, that there should be marketing system and infrastructure so that these products from markets can be sold at a profitable scale. Next is that there should also be healthy livestock management, and there should also be exploration of potential of medicinal plants. Now Himalayas are very rich in medicinal plants. Then there's problem of water, so we need to have region specific water security solutions, and we also need to have cleaner energy solutions. For example, in hilly regions, sunlight provision can be provided, so solar option can be explored. Then the solution, any solution should have people at the center, because it is the people who know the region the best. So they should be involved in planning. So it should not be ignored, especially women, because see, nature and nurture, they are closely intertwined, and women have a very close relationship with both nature and also the social conditions. So their inputs are very, very important. Now people are custodians of important traditional knowledge, like how to prepare seeds, how to harvest, what medicinal plants are there. So their knowledge should be harvested, and that should be included in policy making and decision making. So this is what the article says. It introduces us to some problems that are unique to that region and some solutions that are suited to that region. Now this article deals with the issue of nutrition guidelines. The government of India is to come out with a set of nutritional guidelines. It basically relates to a government program called ICDS, which is Integrated Child Development Services. So there are a set of services that are covered under this scheme, like immunization, supplementary nutrition, health checkup, referral services, preschool non-formal education, and nutrition and health information. So these nutrition guidelines would be basically focused on supplementary nutrition. And this scheme basically focuses on pregnant women and lactating women and children from 6 months old to 6 years old. So nutrition guidelines would be for the supplementary nutrition part, which is provided through Anganwadi centers. Now, first of all, what is nutrition guidelines? Now, nutrition guidelines contain information and advice on globally accepted best practices to combat malnutrition. Now, what is malnutrition? When you're not getting proper nutrients in your diet, you are said to be suffering from malnutrition. Now, malnutrition has a double burden. You can be overweight and still be suffering from malnutrition, and you can be underweight and suffering from malnutrition. Now, your nutrition is basically comprised of macronutrients and micronutrients. Macronutrients basically are your fats, proteins and carbohydrates, and micronutrients are various vitamins and minerals which are important for your diet. If there is not good balance in your macronutrients and micronutrients, then you are said to be suffering from malnutrition. For example, the deficiency of vitamin A leads to night blindness. Similarly, deficiency of vitamin C can lead to a disease called scurvy, right? And if you're deficient in vitamin B12, you can be suffering from low energy, and there are other conditions. So nutrition, balanced nutrition is very, very important. And it is more important for children in the age group of 6 months to 6 years old, because your maximum development of your brain that happens is from 0 to 2 years or 0 to 3 years. So this is the period when your body needs most nutritious food. And unfortunately, most of the kids in our country don't get access to that food. Though nature has prepared a perfect food for little kids called mother's milk, but when the mother is not getting enough nutrients in her own diet, her milk is also not of that quality to provide nutrients to a child. So nutrition guidelines would help the Anganwadi centers to produce a diet which is having a perfect balance of macro and micro nutrients, and that should be suited for different populations in our country. Now, the nutrient norms will prescribe the ideal diet for young children and pregnant women. The guidelines are likely to prescribe healthy diet for pregnant women and lactating mothers. I've already told you the importance. And for children in the age group of 6 months to 6 years. This is the focus of the ICDS program. Who receive ration and hot cooked meals at Anganwadi centers under government supplementary nutrition program, which is part of the integrated child development services. That is why it is called integrated, because there is integration at 2 levels. First, integration of mother and child, right? And then there is integration of different schemes. So that is why it is called integrated child development scheme. Now, nutrition norms are also expected to suggest how to source the food that would be distributed at Anganwadis and what caloric content should these have. And they may also suggest nutrition intake for children who are suffering from severe acute malnutrition. Now, this article also tells us about the nutrition survey. The first nutrition survey was conducted in the country between 2016 and early 2018. And it found out that 2.8% of children in 0 to 4 years age group suffered from the double burden. Now, what is double burden? Double burden of malnutrition is characterized by coexistence of undernutrition along with overweight and obesity. I've already told you, you can be overweight and yet you can be malnourished, right? And it said that 0.8% of the people in the categories of 59 years and 10 to 19 years also face the issue of malnutrition. So it is not only limited to children, even adults suffer from malnutrition. If you are suffering from micronutrient deficiency, then also it can be said that you are suffering from malnutrition. And a lot of people in our country, even the ones who are coming from middle class families or upper class families who are not balancing their diet, are malnourished in one form or the other. Now the double burden also comprises of diet related non-communicable diseases within individuals, households and populations. What are non-communicable diseases that one person cannot spread to other? For example, diabetes. If unfortunately someone is suffering from diabetes, he cannot pass it on to someone else through contact. So these are non-communicable diseases and they are called lifestyle diseases because diabetes, hypertension, stress, they are all result of your lifestyle, lack of exercise and bad diet. So your nutrition is very, very important. It should be balanced. It should have a balance between the macronutrients and the micronutrients. GDP to shrink at 14%, Goldman Sachs. Now, first of all, simply what is GDP? GDP is the sum total of the final value of all the goods and services produced within a territory in a given year. So important is territory, the area. Doesn't matter if it's the nationals or foreigners who are producing those goods and services. All that matters is that they are produced in the particular area. That comes under the definition of GDP. This is a very simple and basic definition. Now this estimate is the most pessimistic estimate by any analyst organization. Goldman Sachs, you must be knowing, is a global analyst company. But they say that in the financial year 22, there would be a sharp rebound because of a low base. Now what does low base mean is that, see, when you're coming from 0 to 1, basically from nothing you're coming to an entity. 1 to 2, gain is double. 2 to 3, your gain is decreasing. So for an economy which is starting from a low threshold, for example, if it was in the negative territory and it is coming to a positive territory, the jump would be higher, right? Because from 0 to, in economic terms, from 0 to 1 or 2 would be a good growth, or minus 1 to 1 would be a good growth. But as you go in the higher grade, for example, from 6% to 7%, statistically, it would not be a very high gain. So this is known as the low base rate. You must have read in newspapers or you must have heard that economies of countries like Bangladesh are growing at 10% while Indian economy is growing at 5%, or economies like American economies, when the things were normal, they were growing at 2% or 3%, and yet they had more value. Why? Because of low base effect. In comparison to US economy, our economy had lower base, so our growth rate was higher than them, but the overall growth was higher for them because they had a higher base. Similarly, if you compare the GDP of India with Bangladesh. Now it estimated that the GDP growth in the next fiscal would be 15.7%. Fiscal is what? A financial year. Basically, it's from March to April. This is known as the financial year. Some people have different definition, but fiscal means a financial year. And that is based on the assumption that 70% of the output that is lost in June 2020 would be recovered in June 2021. And the real GDP growth would be around 27.1% in this April-June 21 quarter. Now what is real GDP? Put simply, real GDP takes care of things like inflation. So you adjust the price increase and then you see the real growth. For that you also have a measure called GDP deflator. In economics, we always have a concept of base year. So we set a base year and in comparison to that base year, we see what the growth is. So we have some statistics or some numbers, and based on those numbers, we see what is the growth, and that is known as the real growth. For now, just keep in mind that real GDP adjusts the inflation or the price rise, and it gives a more accurate figure of the GDP. And the important point is GDP deflator. So friends, that is all for this video. Thank you. Please do connect with us on our Instagram page, UPSC for Everyone. I hope this was helpful. If you have any comments or any suggestions, please put them in the comment section. See you next time. Till then, stay happy, stay safe, and have a nice day. Namaste and Jai Hind.